Before we start, I would like to thank Ubisoft for providing me with access to this game. So after showcasing their technical competence with one of last year's most visually impressive games, Avatar: Frontiers of Pandora, Massive Entertainment returns with their in-house snowdrop engine for Star Wars Outlaws. And visually speaking, while I feel this game doesn't quite match the cutting-edge visuals of Avatar, the team at Massive has done an excellent job of capturing the essence of Star Wars and delivering a richly detailed game world with outstanding lighting thanks to their engine's integrated ray tracing. But not everything is perfect and there are some issues. For instance, the facial animation and the characters' quality aren't on the same level as the environment. And there are some occasional visual artifacts and glitches. And overall, it feels like the game could have benefited from more time in the oven. Additionally, the performance is not great, as this is one of the most demanding games I have tested this year. But on the plus side, Massive has included a well-designed graphics menu with a wide range of settings to tweak. So in this video we will check what each setting does visually, how it performs, and what are the optimal settings to achieve a good balance between performance and visuals. So without any further ado, let's get going. Let's start by discussing image quality. Now, when I examined the game for the first time, there is one issue that stands out, which is the blurry and washed out looking image, especially at the bottom and the top of the screen. Even when disabling all post-processing effects, this problem persists and affects all upscalers and modes. And it seems like this setting called lens and cinematic effect quality is the reason behind this issue. You can see here that when using low or medium, the game becomes significantly sharper, unlike high and ultra. So you might say, okay, I'll use low or medium, but unfortunately that's not the full story, as using low or medium introduces some lines that resembles aliasing when moving the camera. So for now there is no option to get rid of this ugly looking post-processing effect while maintaining a stable and clear image. When it comes to the upscalers at 1440p using quality mode, we can see that TAA exhibits noticeable ghosting, which is visible on this moving plant. FSR3 has the usual disocclusion artifacts and pixelation around moving objects. XeSS has a lot of shimmering, which is visible particularly near these moving particles, and DLSS is the most stable here, but with it those particles are not rendered correctly and they show smearing artifacts, which we can see more clearly in this example here. The game also offers two options for upscaling. We have a fixed and a biased scaling mode. Basically, the fixed mode applies a fixed scaling factor. For example, when using the DLSS quality mode at 1440p, that factor will be 67% of 1440p. On the other hand, the biased mode applies the same scaling factor, but it dynamically adjusts that factor towards 67% of 4K. And from what I have seen, there is no significant difference in image quality between the two scaling modes. And of course, on the performance side, the fixed mode runs better than the biased mode. So if you are using upscaling, I recommend sticking with the fixed mode. The game also includes both FSR3 and DLSS frame generation, but unfortunately it's not using the newest FSR 3.1, which limits frame generation to FSR3 upscaling. In terms of stability, FSR3 frame generation performs quite well here and significantly better than it did in Avatar at launch, delivering a smooth image without any frame pacing issues even with VRR. And I tried FSR3 mod by Nukem to enable frame gen with DLSS on the 3060 Ti, but unfortunately it doesn't work well in this game, and it introduces some ghosting around the main character, as you can see here. And I have played a large portion of the game using DLSS frame generation, and similar to FSR3 frame generation, it works exceptionally well with no major visual artifacts or performance issues. Let's move on to ray tracing and RTXDI. Star Wars Outlaws uses a software-based solution for ray tracing, but despite this, the game can still take advantage of the XR and the ray tracing acceleration cores within the GPU to improve the performance of RT effects. And to test this, I disabled the XR using NVIDIA Profile Inspector, which essentially disables the RT cores in the GPU. When comparing the performance between the XR on and off, I noticed that with ray tracing tracing effect set to mix between medium and high, disabling the XR reduces performance by around 8%. However, when the ray tracing effects are maxed out, the performance hit is more significant with around 27%. So if you have a GPU that does not support the XR and lacks dedicated hardware for ray tracing, consider reducing the quality of the RT effects. The game offers a lot of settings to adjust these RT effects. First, we have ray traced contact shadows, and this is by far the most subtle RT effect in this game, as its visual impact is limited to specific areas like here, and the performance hit is also not that significant even when going from low to high, so I recommend keeping this one at high. Next, we have ray traced diffuse reflections. This one controls the diffused lighting aspect of ray traced global illumination and determines how light is scattered and reflected off rough surfaces. And there is a noticeable change only when going from low to medium, as going to high does not have a significant visual impact. Performance-wise, going from low to medium costs around 4% and going to high around 6%. And the visual impact of this setting is hard to notice during normal gameplay, which is why I recommend sticking with low or use medium. And to adjust the resolution of the RT diffused lighting, we have ray traced diffused reflections resolution. And here we can see that medium exhibits a lot of flickering unlike high and ultra. And performance wise, there is around 9% cost when going from medium to high and 21% when going to ultra. So for this one I recommend high. Moving on to ray traced specular reflections. This one determines the number of objects reflected on smooth or mirror-like surfaces. And here we see a noticeable visual improvement only when going to ultra. And this is mirrored in performance, where going from low to high has a small cost around 3% and going to ultra costs around 7%. So here I recommend high, not just because of the performance but also because of the next setting, which controls the resolution of these reflections. Here, even with ultra resolution, we can see that going from high to ultra specular reflections introduces a lot of flickering, and we can see the same thing here in this example with medium resolution. In terms of performance, the resolution setting is demanding when using higher options. Here there is no significant impact when going from very low to high, but going to very high costs around 7% and going to ultra around 18%. So to minimize the amount of flickering on smooth surfaces, I recommend using high specular reflections along with high resolution. Another way to improve the stability and quality of ray tracing in this game is to use DLSS Ray Reconstruction. Enabling it overrides both the specular and the diffused reflections resolution settings and replaces the default denoisers used for these RT effects. And the results are a mixed bag. On one hand, DLSS Ray Reconstruction can significantly enhance the quality and stability of RT reflections and even add more details. But on the other hand, Ray Reconstruction can introduce some artifacts. The most noticeable one is the smearing around moving objects and characters, as you can see here. And on the performance side, Ray Reconstruction can have a small impact, around 3% compared to ultra diffused and specular reflections resolution. But when coming from high resolution, the impact is more significant with around 30%. So here use Ray Reconstruction if you are already using ultra resolution for diffused and specular reflections and you don't mind the visual artifacts. Otherwise, it's better to leave this option disabled. Next, we have BVH Quality. This one adjusts the quality of the geometry used for ray tracing, and using higher options can improve the accuracy of the RT effects. Like here, we can see better and more accurate lighting and reflections with high compared to low. Performance-wise, the impact when going from low to high is negligible. Therefore, I recommend keeping this one at high. And finally, for ray tracing, we have NVIDIA RTX Direct Lighting. I won't go into detail about this high-end feature and its visual improvements, as that falls outside the scope and the purpose of this video. But here in this comparison, we can see some visual changes, like how the shadows are softer and more accurate compared to the default ray tracing, and how the diffused lighting is generally better, especially when going to ultra. But what's not better is the performance. Here with the 4070 Super, going from off to just slow costs around 21%, to medium 29%, to high 37%, and finally to ultra 42%. So overall this is a high-end feature, and given that the game already includes ray tracing, it doesn't make sense to recommend RTXDI, as it has a substantial impact on both performance and VRAM usage. Let's move on to environment reflection quality. Now, in addition to ray trace reflections, the game also relies on real-time cube map reflections, which are mostly used on transparent surfaces like this one. And this setting controls the quality of these reflections, and it has no significant performance impact, so keep it at high. Next we have Fog Blur, and this one has a subtle visual impact on distant volumetric fog, as you can see here, and there is no performance hit when enabling this setting. So if you like this effect, don't worry about the performance and keep it enabled. Microdetail Quality adjusts the number of small objects on some specific areas. Like here we can see more small foliage on both nearby and distant trees when going from low to medium and high. And performance wise this setting has no impact, therefore I recommend leaving this one at high. Particle quality adjusts the resolution and quality of particles, and when these elements are far from the camera, the performance impact of this setting is negligible. However, when particles and other visual effects are close to the camera, there is a significant 22% hit when using high, so here I recommend low or medium. Scatter density adjusts the amount of clutter, such as grass, bushes, and other objects. And performance-wise in this scene, going from low to medium costs around 3%, and to high and ultra around 7%. So here I think medium offers a good balance and is the option I recommend. Let's move on to shadow quality. This one adjusts the resolution and quality of sun shadows, but in this game even with high, the quality of these shadows is not particularly impressive, and as a result this setting has no significant impact on performance. Therefore I recommend keeping shadows at high. Shadow proxies in theory should replace the shadow casting geometry with a lower quality one to improve performance. And in this game it's really challenging to notice the visual impact of this setting. But here in this scene I noticed that the shadow of this tree is slightly less detailed when this setting is enabled. And performance wise there is around 3% gain when using shadow proxies. So here I think it's better to leave this one enabled, because its visual impact is hard to notice during normal gameplay. Spotlight shadows adjust the number of shadows cast by local or artificial lights, so more local shadows will be rendered at the same time when using higher options. And as a side effect, this setting also have an impact on the draw distance of local shadows. Like here we can see a noticeable shadows pop in when using few or moderate, and performance wise this is another setting that has a negligible impact, so I recommend keeping this one at mini. Spotlight shadow quality adjusts the quality and resolution of local shadows, and here we can see that going below high drastically impacts the quality of shadows, and performance wise there is no noticeable difference between the options, so I recommend keeping this one at ultra. Deformable terrain quality determines the level of detail of the deformation on some terrains like sand or snow, and here both low and medium look pretty much similar, and the same goes for high and ultra. Performance wise, even when going from low to ultra, I couldn't measure any significant impact, so for this one I recommend high or ultra. Extra streaming distance adjusts the draw distance of distant objects, and as we increase this setting we see an incremental improvement in the overall geometric quality of these objects. Performance wise in this scene there is around 4 to 5% cost when going from 0 to 100, so here unless you really need the extra performance I recommend leaving this one at 100. Object detail controls the level of detail of both close and mid-distance objects. With higher values, clutter like grass and bushes will maintain their highest geometric quality at a distance, and as a result using lower values will lead to noticeable LED pop-in close to the camera. And performance-wise this is one of the most demanding settings in this game. Here going from 75 to 125 costs around 9%, 150 around 12%, 200 around 20%, 30%, 300 around 29%, and finally to 400 around 38%. So here I think 125 or 150 are the sweet spots and the best values to get good performance without a lot of LOD pop-in. Destruction quality, according to its description, should control the quality and quantity of destruction fragments. But here I am not seeing any major visual difference, and the performance is pretty much similar between the options. So unless you are encountering substantial performance drops during intense combat scenarios, I recommend leaving this one at high. Spotlight projection resolution adjusts the resolution of pre-calculated spotlight projection textures, and it's really challenging to notice the visual impact of this setting without taking screenshots and comparing the options side by side like here, where small changes can be observed around the spotlight and on the wall. Performance-wise, this setting has no impact, so I recommend leaving it at 512. Terrain tessellation controls the geometry quality and the level of bumpiness and depth of the details on the terrain. And here the most noticeable visual improvement occurs when moving from low to medium, while going further to high and ultra doesn't have a significant impact. Performance-wise, there is a small cost around 2 to 3% when going from low to ultra. So given the minimal visual difference between medium and ultra, I recommend medium terrain tessellation. Volumetric Fog adjusts the resolution of volumetric effects, so with higher options we can see less flickery and more defined fog and light shafts, as you can see here. Performance-wise, there is around 3% when going from low and medium to high, and 8% when going to ultra, so for this one I recommend medium or high. And lastly, we have Volumetric Clouds. This one controls both the resolution and density of volumetric clouds, with higher options resulting in more detailed and denser clouds. Performance-wise in this scene, there is around 2% cost when going from low to high, but in some other areas with more clouds, you might see a more significant impact, so I recommend leaving this one at medium. And with all that being said, these are my recommended settings for Star Wars Outlaws. Now let's compare the performance of the optimized and max settings with 200 object detail at 1440p using fixed DLSS quality mode with no frame generation or RTX direct lighting on both sides. Now to be clear, even with the optimized settings, maintaining a steady 60 FPS all the time with the 3060 Ti is so challenging, especially here in Mirogana, which is one of the most demanding areas in the game. So with this class of GPUs, frame generation or a more aggressive form of upscaling is required to achieve 60 FPS or more all the time. But despite this, there is a performance gain of around 62% when going from max to optimized settings. And here in the open areas of Tushara, we are seeing almost the same difference. And with that we arrive at the end. Thank you so much for watching and for your time. If you enjoyed the video, leave a like, and if not, leave a dislike. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell for future videos, and hopefully I'll see you all in the next one.